In this video, I'm going to show you how to create buttons and switches in Figma using auto layout, a great tool to use. In the previous video, I showed you how to create icons. And again, this is a video series of a bunch of videos put together of how we are creating a home automation app design in Figma. So let's jump right into it. All right, so here we have our view of our home automation app that we are currently busy designing in Figma using auto layout. In the first video, we essentially created two frames, dashboard and living room. And we also took a rectangle, we dropped it in there, and I showed you what would happen if you change the fix versus hug. If you didn't watch that video, make sure to check it out, video number 1. Also, make sure to like and subscribe to this YouTube channel. What we want to do now is we want to essentially start creating these buttons that we have right here. And we also want to create the on switch and off switch. For us to start doing that, we need to go and create a frame or drag down a frame. First thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to rename the frame to maybe icons or buttons. And I'm just going to drag right here. Again, I am very particular as to where my frames are and how my frames are situated. All right, so we are going to go ahead and change the color. And I'm going to change the color to something a little bit gray just so that we can see what we are doing, because the buttons that we're going to create and the switches that we're going to create, I just want to make sure that I have a gray background so that we can actually see our icons or our buttons while we're creating it. So the first one I want to do is the plus button. What I'm going to do is the icons that we did in video 2, the icons that we sourced using Iconify. I'm going to go ahead and select the rounded plus that we sourced, and I'm going to copy it, Control C, Command C, and I'm going to drop it into the artboard. Now you're going to see that it's right there in the artboard, nothing special at this stage. But what I want to do next is I want to hit Control G because I want to group it, and I'm just going to use camel case, but I'm going to call it the plus button. All right. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to activate auto layout. It's not really going to do much at this stage. You're going to currently see that the width and height is set to hug. I'm going to change that to fix. When we set the width and height to fix, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a full. When you add a full, obviously you're not going to see the icon because both of them are white. That is fine for now. Another little trick that I normally do is I use the radius to create a circle. So I'm going to just change it to 500. Essentially, we want to create a circle. Before I move on, the next thing I want to do is I want to remove the actual space in between, or the gap in between different items within the auto layout. Because we only have one, we don't really need that. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the icon color to something darker. Okay, let's just change it to that for now. All right, so now that the icon is darker, I'm going to start increasing the width and height. The actual width and height that we want is 60 by 60 for these icons. So I am going to go ahead, I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to change the width and height to 60. All right, so when you do that though, we're still not where we want to be. We need to make sure that the alignment is right in the center, and where it says align center, I'm going to click on it, and now you'll see that we have successfully created our button. All right, so that's the first button that we created. Now let's go ahead and create the rest of them. To speed things up, what I normally do is I take what I have, you can hold in Alt and Shift and you can drag it over. So I'm just going to drag over a few of them here. And again, this is just me being very particular, so that's why I'm making sure that it's 30 pixels apart. Alignment and spacing, stuff like that is super important with design, so just keep on doing it. Okay, so the next one we need to go and create is the TV and the LED. So I'm going to take my icon, I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to select my second plus button, and I'm going to rename it to just call it TV icon, or TV button for that matter. All right, so I'm literally just going to select the plus icon, and I'm going to drop the TV icon that we have already copied into there. You're going to see that it's moving everything up. That is absolutely fine. I'm just going to go ahead and change the color as well. Just on a side note though, we are going to touch base on colors and assets in our next videos. So at this stage, we're just using the color picker and I'm just randomly selecting a color. But throughout this video series, I will show you how to add proper colors and assets and variables to your design so that it's consistent throughout. All right, so we're going to take the plus icon, we're going to go ahead and delete that. And now we have our little TV, so we can go ahead and do the rest of them as well. The next one I need is LED and the little speaker. So I'm going to take the LED strip and I'm going to select the plus, I'm going to drop it in there, and I'm going to take the speaker and I am going to drop it in there as well. And the last one we need to do is the little thermostat. So I'm going to take the thermostat, copy that, and I'm gonna drop it in there. Okay, now I'm gonna multi-select all the plus icons. I'm gonna hit delete, and once that is deleted, I can take the other 3 icons that I'm going to use, and we're just going to use the color that we want for it. Okay, so now we created the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 button icons that we are using throughout the design. The next thing I want to do is create the on and off switch. This is quite fun to do, and again, I'm doing that using auto layout. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little ellipse circle, and I'm just going to draw it. And I just want to double check what was the actual width and height that I used, just for consistency. And it looks like I used 23. So I'm going to change the color to white, and we're going to change the width and height, but I'm going to make sure I activate constrained properties, because if you don't do that, again, you're going to end up with, sorry, that was already activated. I'm going to deactivate it, and we're going to change it again. And you're going to see that it's just stretching out our circle. It doesn't look good. So we're going to make sure that we add constrained properties, and then we have our little circle. Okay, perfect. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to group it, call it switch on. Okay, so I renamed it to switch on right here in the group. We're actually going to take this group and we're going to convert it into an auto layout. At this stage, it's not really going to do much. What you're going to see though is that it changes the group to an auto layout. Okay, perfect. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is add a fill to the auto layout, and I have a specific color. Again, we're going to touch base on colors, variables, and all that kind of good stuff in the next videos, but for now, we're just going to use this for simplicity purposes. All right, so I'm going to select that auto layout, and we're going to change that fill to that, and now we have something. It's not great yet, it's not there yet, but it is definitely something. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is we're actually going to add some spacing and some padding. First, going to change the radius. I'm just going to change it to 50 for now. We also want to get rid of the gap, but now we want to start adding some padding. So I'm just going to start with 10 as the padding. Now it just looks like a little circle. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the width to fixed, and we're going to change it to, let's try 80 for now. Now you're going to see that it's starting to look like a switch button, but it's still not 100% there yet. So to fine tune it, we can work on the padding. I'm going to change the padding to perhaps 6. Yeah, let's change it to 4. Okay, now it's starting to look like something. The other thing though is our switch on this side is on the right hand side, it's on, and the left hand side it's off, right? So we need to change that. And our switch is a little too wide at this stage, so I'm gonna first change this to 60. Yeah, that looks a little better. What we want to do is the little circular icon to be on the right hand side. We again going to use alignment. I'm just gonna move this to the right. Boom, right there. Now, before there was any auto layout, this process was extremely tedious to create without auto layout. You had to physically go and measure everything, which was definitely a tedious task to do. All right, so now we have a basic switch button. At this stage, we're just gonna add a little bit of shadow just so it looks a little bit more realistic. The first thing I normally do is I select the circular ellipse, and I'm going to add an effect. I'm going to add a little drop shadow, but the default drop shadow is a little bit too much for me, so I'm gonna click on it, and I normally like to work with the spread, so I'm going to spread it out a little bit. I'm gonna change the y-axis and change the x-axis, just to kind of play around with it at this stage, just so that we can get something that looks a little bit more realistic. I'm actually gonna drop the opacity to 15. Again, design is all about how it looks and feels. So that looks a lot more realistic to me. So the next thing I'm going to do is adding a little bit more of an effect. Again, this is all optional, you don't have to do it, but you can also add an inner shadow to this specific auto layout group or auto layout item that you have. So I'm going to add effects. We're going to change the drop shadow to inner shadow. Now, by default, again, that is a lot. So I just want to click and open up the settings here, and I'm going to change the opacity to 10. Let's change it to 15 again, but I'm also going to change the blur. I'm maybe going to decrease it. I think, oh, there we go. I want to take the y-axis and I want to decrease it a little bit. And then we're just going to up it a little bit here. And now it's starting to look like a realistic switch. All right, so that was the basics of creating an on switch. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create the off switch. So to do that, we're going to select our auto layout group item and hold in Alt and Shift and drag it over, and we are essentially going to create the off button. Now to do that, the first thing I want to do is I want to select the auto layout group. I want to disable or remove the inner shadow, as well as I want to create a little gray that showcases that it's actually off. So I'm just going to put it right there. Again, this is all about personal preference. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to move the alignment from right to left. The last thing I'm going to do is disabling the shadow. Let's see how that looks like. Yeah, that's good enough. That looks good. The next thing I want to show you, the next video I want to really focus on is starting to put everything together. So I'm going to show you how to use the assets. I'm going to show you how to take all this and drop it into the assets. And as we go through all this video series, you're going to see that we start using the assets more and more and more, where at the end, when we put together this entire design, we're literally just going to take everything from our assets and we're just going to drop it in to this original dashboard and living room frame that we created in the first video. All right, so make sure to follow, and yeah, thanks for watching.